Hey, look, I don't mean to be dipping into y'all's business, but you've been corporatized, blackularized, and superflied. You've been macked, hammered, slaughtered, and shafted. Now we want to turn you on to some brand new jive. You're going to be glorified, unified, and filled with pride when you see 5 on the black hand side.
Say it loud. I'm black and I'm proud.
5 on the black hand side. It's a real clean scene with a lot of laughter in between. It's all about a family of 5 and how they survive. Check out Mr. Brooks. John Henry is his name. Male chauvinism is his game.
Controlling women is an art. You have to have a certain knack.
Oh, talk that talk, John Henry.
This is Mrs. Brooks. She's tired of singing the blues, done paid enough dues, says she's gonna put on her walking shoes.
I am leaving, Mr. Brooks.
Oh, my God.
This is #1 son, Booker T.
Booker T. Washington Brooks.
You gonna put down that spear?
Can a buffalo skate?
And this is #2 son, Gideon. He's a real down dude with a beautiful attitude. All slim and trim in his afro, yeah. He's an ace in any race. And dig, daughter Gail. Looks good, like a sister should. She's uptight and full of fight.
This is the 20th century. It's our way of saying we're black people.
What?
Then there's Marvin, Preston, Sweetmeat, Ruby, Rolls Royce, Stormy Monday, and me. Oh, fun loving. I might not be the baddest man in the world, but I'm in the top 2, and my father is getting old.
The bad guys are winning.
Your spirit's gonna be rejuvenated, your mind's elevated, and your soul celebrated. Good vibes are gonna thrive when you see 5 on the black hand side.
On the black hand side, we can create good vibrations to feel our relations with love.
5 on the black hand side.
Yeah, but the question is more, how do you get there? Do you get there by confrontation, violence?
Oh, is that the question you were asking?
Yeah.
See, that's another thing. When you talk about a revolution, most people think violence, without realizing that the real content of any kind of revolutionary thrust lies in the principles and the goals that you're striving for, not in the way you reach them. On the other hand, because of the way this society is organized, because of the violence that exists on the surface everywhere, you have to expect that there are going to be such explosions. You have to expect things like that as reactions. If you are a black person and live in the black community all your life and walk out on the street every day seeing white policemen surrounding you, when I was living in Los Angeles, for instance, long before the situation in L.A. ever occurred, I was constantly stopped. No, the police didn't know who I was, but I was a black woman, and I had a natural, and they, I suppose, thought that I might be a, quote, militant. And when you live under a situation like that constantly, and then you ask me, you know, whether I approve of violence. I mean, that just doesn't make any sense at all. Whether I approve of guns. I grew up in Birmingham, Alabama. Some very, very good friends of mine were killed by bombs that were planted by racists. I remember from the time I was very small, I remember the sounds of bombs exploding across the street, our house shaking. I remember my father having to have guns at his disposal at all times because of the fact that at any moment we might expect to be attacked. The man who was at that time in complete control of the city government, his name was Bull Connor, would often get on the radio and make statements like, niggers have moved into a white neighborhood, we better expect some bloodshed tonight. And sure enough, there would be bloodshed. after the 4 young girls who lived, one of them lived next door to me. I was very good friends with the sister of another one. My sister was very good friends with all 3 of them. My mother taught one of them in her class. My mother, in fact, when the bombing occurred, one of the mothers of one of the young girls called my mother and said, can you take me down to the church to pick up Carol? We heard about the bombing, and I don't have my car. And they went down, and what did they find? They found limbs and heads strewn all over the place. And then after that, in my neighborhood, all of the men organized themselves into an armed patrol. They had to take their guns and patrol our community every night because they did not want that to happen again. I mean, that's why when someone asks me about violence, I just find it incredible. Because what it means is that the person who's asking that question has absolutely no idea what black people have gone through, what black people have experienced in this country since the time the first black person was kidnapped from the shores of Africa.
I am Lucifer, the light bearer. My magnificent gift to humanity is the absolute absence of morality. Nothing restricts me. I transgress every law, but read the sacred books and constitutions. No religion can contain me. I destroy all theories and cause all dogmas to explode. The depths of the depths of the depths, no one lives in deeper than I do. I am the source of all abysses. I am the one who gives life to dark grottos, the one who knows the center around which turn all densities. I am the viscosity of everything that vainly attempts to be definite, the supreme strength of magma, the stench that denounces the hypocrisy of perfumes, the carrion mother of every flower, the corrupter of vain minds, swallowed in perfection. No peace with me, no peaceful little home, no candle gospels, no sugar virgin for the clammy tongues of hairy nuns. I don't really defecate on the leprous birds of morality. I do not forbid myself from imagining the prophet and all fours being mounted by a horny donkey. I am the ecstatic songster of incest and the champion of all the predicate. With the nail of my finger, I delighted his eyes open the belly of an innocent, so I can dip my breath in his strife.
Good evening, boys and girls, ladies and gentlemen. It's King Khan here from the Global Solidarity Forever. We are doing episode number 4 of TAROT-RISM. Now, tonight we have a very special guest again. This is a part 2 of the John B. Smith series that we're basically asking John B. Smith of the Invaders to give us a brief history of the way Black Power evolved in America. And if you saw our last episode, right now we're going to focus on one card primarily in this one. Last episode we were talking about Eartha Kitt, and John B was telling us about how the Invaders got started. Today we're going to go into more historic stuff, and the card that we're going to focus on is the number 10, the Malcolm X card. And now this is a very this card is right in the middle of the path of illumination. So what we're seeing in this card is Malcolm X in 3 different parts of his life. On the top, you see up here. Oh, I got that right. That is Malcolm X when he was Malcolm Little, when he was a hustler and a pimp, drug user. And then we see him joining the Nation of Islam, which is on the other side here. Oh, wait, can I do this? No, wrong hand. There we go. Here we go. Now that's when Malcolm X joined the Nation of Islam. You see his descent into the waters, and then the Malcolm over here is the Saint Malcolm, where he discovered universal brotherhood and sisterhood and preached love. So what we're seeing in this wheel is that there is no movement happening. So after Malcolm X was assassinated, there was a pause in the movement. And what's happening here is that what's missing in this Wheel of Fortune is someone to turn the lever and to continue the movement after Malcolm's assassination. So what this card is actually talking about is the reliance on the other. And the way Jodorowsky describes it, it's the other with a capital O. That means that when you get this card, what it's saying to you is that right now you might be stuck and you are reliant on another person to be the motion that will continue your movement. Or you could see it in another light, is that you are the person that will help another person get unstuck. So this is the duality of this card, and we're going to see a couple of clips of Malcolm at his finest, and then we're going to bring John B here and my co-host Jenny Messer and talk some Black Power talk. All right.
In order for you and me to devise some kind of method or strategy to offset some of the events or a repetition of the events that have taken place here in Los Angeles recently, we have to go to the root. We have to go to the cause. Dealing with the condition itself is not enough. And it is because of our effort toward getting straight to the root that people oftentimes think we're dealing in hate. We are oppressed. We are exploited. We are downtrodden. We are denied not only civil rights, but even human rights. So the only way we're going to get some of this oppression and exploitation away from us or aside from us is come together against the common enemy. Who taught you to hate the texture of your hair? Who taught you to hate the color of your skin to such extent that you bleach to get like the white man? Who taught you to hate the shape of your nose and the shape of your lips? Who taught you to hate yourself from the top of your head to the soles of your feet? Who taught you to hate your own kind? Who taught you to hate the race that you belong to? So much so that you don't want to be around each other. No, before you come asking Mr. Muhammad, does he teach hate, you should ask yourself, who taught you to hate being what God gave you? And I, for one, as a Muslim, believe that the white man is intelligent enough. If he were made to realize how black people really feel and how fed up we are without that old compromise and sweet talk. Stop sweet talking him. Tell him how you feel. Tell him what kind of hell you've been catching, and let him know that if he's not ready to clean his house up, if he's not ready to clean his house up, he shouldn't have a house. It should catch on fire and burn down.
Tonight, Front Page Challenge welcomes the outspoken Negro leader, Malcolm X.
Sir, what's the real reason why you two men split? Is it merely ideological, or is it personality? What else?
Probably personality. It was not the statement that originally was given by the movement when we split. It's more personality than anything else.
You've called people like Martin Luther King, who just got a Nobel Peace Prize, an Uncle Tom. Is this correct, first?
Well, I'd rather say that in the States, there's a law that has recently been passed, or a decision handed down by the court, wherein if you call someone an Uncle Tom, they can sue you for libel.
Well,
so I never refer to them as Uncle Tom's. I would say that Uncle Martin is my friend.
Uncle Martin is your friend, yet you would disagree with his approach to what he wants to accomplish.
Definitely. If his approach would bring about what the black man in America needs to completely eliminate the problem that we have, I would say well and good. But I very much doubt that anyone who adopts the approach that Martin Luther King has been teaching to our people in that country can point to any meaningful gains that has actually served to solve the problem.
Black Muslims have sometimes, whether you have or not, and I think probably you have sometimes, it seemed to me, been preaching hate to meet hate.
I don't advocate any kind of hate.
But there's a lot of talk that sounds very much like it.
No, I think that the guilt complex of the American white man is so profound until when you begin to analyze the real condition of the black man in America, instead of the American white man eliminating the causes that create that condition, he tries to cover it up by accusing his accusers of teaching hate. But actually, they're just exposing him for being responsible for what exists.
Well, that's something of an argument, but I've heard speeches made by some of the people of your group. I think I've heard you make speeches. It seemed to me that you were advocating what I would have to describe, I think, as violence to meet the serious injuries that have been done your people, with which I totally agree.
I don't call that violence. I don't in any way encourage black people to go out and initiate acts of aggression indiscriminately against whites. But I do believe that the black man in the United States and any human being, anywhere, is well within his right to do whatever is necessary, by any means necessary, to protect his life and property, especially in a country where the federal government itself has proven that it is either unable or unwilling to protect the lives and property of those human beings.
Just before Pierre takes it, you've got a pretty good fighter and the world's heavyweight champion lined up with you to help out. Yes, Pierre.
Well, Mr. X, if I guess I call you that, is that the proper appellation,
Yes.
Mr. X? I'm wondering if you still believe, as I think you certainly did at the time you were allied to the black Muslim movement, in a segregated black nation in North America.
I don't believe in any form of segregation or any form of racism. I'm against any form of segregation and against racism.
Am I right in saying that the black Muslim movement, which you have left, did believe in that?
Well, Elijah Muhammad taught his followers that the only solution was a separate state for black people. And as long as I thought he genuinely believed that himself, I believed in him and believed in his solution. But when I began to doubt that he himself believed that that was feasible, and I saw no kind of action designed to bring it into existence or bring it about, then I turned in a different direction.
Are you still a Muslim yourself?
Oh, yes. I'm a Muslim. I believe in the religion of Islam, which believes in brotherhood, complete brotherhood of all people. But at the same time that I believe in this brotherhood, I don't believe in forcing my desire for brotherhood upon those who aren't willing to accept it.
Of course, I think the Christians would say that they also believed in brotherhood. What did you say to that?
I'd say they believe in it, but don't practice it.
That'd be a pretty good answer.
And we are back, and it's my pleasure to introduce civil rights hero, John B. Smith of the Invaders. John B., how you doing?
What's up, Harris?
So good to have you back. We got Jenny, my co-host Jenny. Oh, Jenny.
Hi.
There she is.
Hi,
All right.
Jenny. How are you?
How are you? Good to see you.
So here we are live from Los Angeles, Atlanta, and Berlin. So, John B., we left off last episode talking about the Black Organizing Project and the origins of of how you got into the Black Power movement. Now, you were telling me about the Black Power sleepover.
When we first got started, like I said, Charles was the only one who really had any real knowledge about Black Power, because he had gone to school at Morehouse, and Atlanta was where everything was happening. So when he came home, he brought all the knowledge that we had with him. But in Atlanta, every weekend, because Atlanta was had 4 universities, 4 schools, HBCUs, and they were like Black Power Central. and kids would come from other schools to Atlanta on the weekends to get, experience, talk about Black Power, because we didn't have a real philosophy or anything. It just started from Stokely saying Black Power on the march to Mississippi.
To use the term Black Power, SNCC had already decided this before the march. That must be properly understood. We decided to use the march for an education purpose. Number one, we wanted to push strongly our struggle against the war in Vietnam. So if people look clearly at the Merited March, you will see anti-Vietnam propping up here. King wasn't using it then, but you will see this is one of the areas where we started to hit him with it seriously. Our march was to put strong nationalism in, to have direct leadership from us, and of course, to throw out Black Power for the mass of the people. Now, I myself had been in Greenwood, Mississippi since early '60. I'd worked in the project there, and when head of the second Congressional District, this was our base. So I had spent time in the jail in Greenwood so many times. The police knew me, the police chief knew me, everyone in the town knew me. So we decided Greenwood, it was SNCC's strongest base in the Delta. We couldn't go wrong. Unfortunately for the police, we went to set up some tents there, and the police decided to arrest me. Okay, so before I was arrested, we were discussing Greenwood. This is where we will launch Black Power. So when I got arrested, Ricks was on the side there when the police said, "Let them arrest you. We'll get you out of jail and you come out and make the speech tonight." And he disappeared. Well, you know how Rick speaks. So anyway, I went to jail. But I was brought out, and when I was released, it was at night, the speech was going on, and when I came to the speech, I wasn't aligned. Ricks came back, he said, "We have everything prepared, we're ready for Black Power, we've spoke about it all day, we've primed up the people," and luckily for us, our biggest problem was Martin Luther King, because I knew that once Black Power was said, Martin Luther King would have to come, not fight against it, but would his best try to give reasonings to water it down. But luckily for us, the night in Greenwood, King had to go to do a taped television thing, I think, for Meet the Press. So he had to go to Memphis. So he was not there the night in Greenwood. Ricks had everybody primed. He said, "Just get to your speech. We're going against freedom now. We're going for Black Power. Don't hit too much on freedom now, but hit the need for power." So we built up on the need for power. And just when I got there, before I got it, Ricks was there saying, "Hit him now, hit him now." And I kept saying, "Give me time, give me time." When we finally got it and we dropped it, Black Power, well, of course, they had been primed and they responded immediately. But I myself, to be honest, I didn't expect that enthusiastic response. You know, and the enthusiastic response obviously not only shocked me, but gave me more energy to carry it on further. By the time we got down that night, SCLC was running around everywhere. We knew it was finished. We had made our victory. They could not bring it back. It was over.
Ricks, he was an important person for you as well.
Yeah, well, this is 1967. Between during the months of October and November, we're still trying to put the Black organizing project together. And I didn't have any real knowledge about Black Power. I was just listening and trying to pick up anything I could to help me understand this new world I had moved into. And Charles, he had all the knowledge for us in terms of Black Power. Whatever he said was what we knew and what we did. But he realized that he was limited, and he wanted to go to Atlanta to get with the people down there, because that Atlanta was like Black Power Central. It was where all of the early Black Power activists developed. And Stokely had, when he started talking about Black Power, he was in Mississippi. So, and working out of Atlanta. So Charles and I, we, drove down on weekend, and Atlanta was where college students mostly, and this is because of the HBCUs all over the South. Black kids would come to Atlanta on the weekend, just like we were doing, to try to get as much information and knowledge about this new phenomena that Stokely had just uttered the previous year in '66, Black Power, and it was just a word, really. And the activists were trying to develop a full philosophy or psychology for it. And
so you were getting together with lots of students and having a kind of like what you call a party, right? Like you guys were listening to music, dancing, but also talking about the Black Power philosophy and crystallizing it.
Yeah, well, like I said, by '67, Stokely had moved on, and he was working out of Washington, D.C. And Rap had moved on to New York, and he was working. And Atlanta, Willie Ricks was the guy who was really putting everything together. It was he, Cleveland Sellers, Featherstone, guys like that went to school in Atlanta. So they were there all the time. But for people like Charles and myself and other Black activists from other schools, we come to Atlanta on weekends, and it was what they call Black Power sleepover. You have to find your own accommodation. Most of us bunked with somebody that we knew or slept in the dorms with different people, and then they would have these sessions, which was really parties, but they were important, and they were for a serious purpose, because, like say, some would be talking about Black Power, some might be dancing, just entertaining themselves, because they would last all night long. And the people who had really studied liberation philosophy and psychology, they had read books like Franz Fanon, Wretched of the Earth, Black Skin, White Mask, Before the Mayflower by Dr. Lerone Bennett, and books like that. So they were the ones interpreting the history for people like me who hadn't really read that much. And so we would just be there trying to get as much information as we can. Sometimes, icons would come down and get with us and try and help educate us.
So it was during the Black Power sleepover where you discovered Queen Mother Moore.
Yes.
And she was an elder.
Queen Mother Moore was the first icon, real Black Power icon that I had a chance to meet and listen to speak. And she was a very dynamic woman. She had started in the 1920s. She was started when, I think she said she was about 14. Her family had moved from New Orleans to New York, and she got involved with the UNIA, that's the United Negro Improvement Association, and that was Marcus Garvey's organization. Marcus Garvey had come to New York in 1914, and he came to America because he had developed the UNIA thought process while he was still in Jamaica. And he was trying to build a business model that ordinary Black people would identify with. And the problem he had was financing. And so he had gone to the Black community and asked them to invest in his idea of the UNIA, and he explained what that was. He wanted to develop companies that manufactured stuff that black people were buying from white people. And he was saying that if we could make these things, then we wouldn't have to depend on white people to provide for us. Plus, it would create jobs, and we could, black people could develop their own businesses. Now, black communities weren't rich by any means, but what black people started to do was pool their pennies and whatever money their community had, and they were investing in the UNIA. And this is money coming from all over the country, not just in New York City. And the UNIA would issue stock for two people who invested in the UNIA. And this was changing the whole capitalistic scenario that America had going when black people came out of slavery. The whole the idea was to keep black people on the bottom as the base of the American capitalistic system, as cheap labor. And so Marcus Garvey had recognized that, and he had built the UNIA to address the fact that black people needed to develop their own capital. And this is when the federal government gets involved in it. And J. Edgar Hoover came into the federal government in 1912 with Woodrow Wilson. And Woodrow Wilson is the president that segregated the federal government. And he instituted segregation throughout the country. And so Marcus Garvey's idea was competing with the American capitalistic system, which was Hoover's job. Hoover was brought into government by Woodrow Wilson to run the radical division of the Bureau of Investigation. This becomes the FBI in the 1930s. But before then, they are the Bureau of Investigation. And so J. Edgar Hoover comes in to stop any radical organization that's going to change that dynamic from with black people from being poor, the base of capitalism as cheap labor to being actual producers of products that America, black people could buy. He had an automobile manufacturing company. He had the Black Star ship line. The Black Star ship line was for getting black people back to Africa. That was the whole basis of the UNIA. And what black people would pay, and he would transport them back to whatever country in Africa they wanted to go to. But the thing about Garvey was that he had created a black military component of it. And I mean, they dressed in military uniform. He had parades down through Harlem. And I mean, you're talking about thousands of people, black people turning out to watch those parades. He had a black nursing corps.
That was all in the 20s already.
Yes, this is in the 1920s.
Wow. Okay.
And so this is what Hoover is reacting to. So he hires informants to infiltrate the UNIA. And he's helped by black leaders that are jealous of Marcus Garvey because he's got all these black people coming out to his parades. He had a gathering at Madison Square Garden, and he maxed it out, man. He filled up a black man filled up the Madison Square Garden back in the 1920s just to hear him speak.
Right. Actually, you know what? That Black Herman, the magician, was also a part of this. He was performing at the Marcus Garvey. Was it a Marcus Garvey Center or a theater? Or he had his own.
There were, like I say, his organization. They were funding all kinds of individual black businesses. There were people with cleaners and things like that in stores that the UNIA were funded, and because these are people who were buying stock in the UNIA. And this is what upset the so-called black leaders that were coming up at this time. People like W.E.B. Du Bois, Chandler Owen, James Weldon Johnson, A. Philip Randolph. All these guys had their own organizations, but they didn't have the kind of response that Marcus Garvey was getting.
So would you say that the NAACP was a kind of like reacting against the UNIA?
Yes, well, the NAACP started out as the Niagara movement. And they got together at Niagara Falls, which is why they called it the Niagara movement, at their first meeting. And they came together as an organization. Their big thing was the New Negro. And that was a counter to Marcus Garvey, because Marcus Garvey was calling people black. He was not identifying with this Negro. And that upset people like W.B. Du Bois and A. Philip Randolph, because they were proud to be Negro. Right. And so they joined Hoover's effort to destroy the UNIA. And what Hoover did was to get one of his informants to say that he sent Marcus Garvey a check in the mail. The check was for $25, and that they could not find that check when they, because Hoover got a court order to really to search through the UNIA's books to see, because they were saying he was swindling black people by getting them to put invest in the UNIA. So they went at him that way first. They tried to get him on swindling or some charge of corruption, but they couldn't find any. So this is when he gets this black guy to swear he sent Marcus Garvey a check, and they charged Marcus with mail fraud. And they took him to court, found him guilty, and exiled him. To England. They deported him to England, and England exiled him to Jamaica. So that was like in prison. He couldn't leave the island. And the federal government seized all the assets of the UNIA, and they sold them for a penny on a dollar to white people. See, and that's what really destroyed the UNIA, and it was done with the help of people like W.B. Du Bois and Chandler Owens and A. Philip Randolph. And so that is some of the conversation that Queen Mother Moore was giving us in her talk. And see, none of this I ever heard of. You know, I didn't know anything about.
This would be a good time to check out. We have a clip of Queen Mother Moore that we'd like to show you.
When the police told Marcus Garvey he couldn't speak to us and prevented him from coming to speak to us one night, we of course went in delegations and everything and raised such a ruckus that they had to let Marcus Garvey speak to us the next night. But when we went, I want you to hear me, when we went determined that nothing would stop Marcus Garvey from speaking to us. Now, how do you do that? How do you go determined to keep the powers that be
you see why I was so excited when I heard Queen Mother Moore talk for the first time, because you got to remember Black Power had just gotten started, and she's talking about guns and and confronting the police. That was unheard of, especially for me being a Black boy from the South. But
and
that was what.
She was speaking about the 1920s, right? She was speaking about, like, I'd never heard of Queen Mother Moore. That's incredible, especially about the guns and everything. That's already on their minds at that time.
Yeah. So it takes us to 1966 and 67 for the Black Panthers to start talking about guns, and defending ourselves. But now they got their the Black Panthers, they got their things from Robert Williams. Robert Williams wrote a book called Negroes with Guns. And he was the first Black person to get a charter from the National Rifles Association to start a group in North Carolina. And he wrote the book, and that was a book that Huey Newton said influenced him most to develop, in developing the Black Panthers. So, but that was the kind of stuff we did at the Black Power sleepovers. We got together and just talked, and when you could hear someone like that talking, that really gave you that motivation and then Stokely's ideas of how to bring that to everybody that through these Black Power sleepovers was really important, because without that, I really wouldn't have had anything other than just Cab's words until I started to actually reading myself and starting to learn.
The real question is that people are not clear on capitalism, because capitalism is a very vicious system, but what it does is it embroideries its viciousness with all sorts of elusive terms. For example, many of us would support capitalism because we actually believe that in a capitalist system, there's a chance for us to get the same amount of money as Rockefeller gets, because we're told that under capitalism there is equality of opportunity. So that we feel that if this year we didn't make as much as Rockefeller made, then we got to work a little bit harder, and next year we're going to make it. But if we carefully examine a capitalist system, we will see that it's based on exploitation, because the viciousness of capitalism, and the reason why once Black people examined we can never be for it, is that under a capitalist system, the fruits of those who labor are enjoyed by somebody else. That is, those who do the laboring, the fruits of their labor, they don't enjoy it. As a matter of fact, we could say under capitalism that the fruits of the labor of the toiling masses are enjoyed by those who do not labor. And again, as Black people, we have clear examples of it. If we were to get the fruits of our labor from slavery, just from slavery, all we got to do is go to Nixon and say, hey, look, you give us the fruits of our labor from slavery and we forget the score. We would be the richest people in the country, again, because under capitalism, the individual exploits the labor of the people. Now, let me show you how backward capitalism is. It's a backward system. We could make two statements about capitalism to show how backward it is. About America. America's a capitalist country. It's thoroughly capitalist. It's an imperialist country. But we could say that, number one, America is the most technologically advanced country in the world. And that's an undeniable fact. It's a truism. It's a truism. America is the most scientifically developed country in the world. And right under that, we could say a second fact, which will show you how backward America is. We could say that America, in 1945, made for her people better cars than she does in 1973. And if you analyze this, you'll see how vicious the system is, because here's America with its great technological skills, its great scientific ability, and rather than making a safe car for people that will last 20 years, which they can do with the scientific knowledge that's at their fingertip, they rather take this knowledge and build a car which will break down every 2 years, so you're forced to buy another car. Thus, you see, under capitalism, what they do is they take their scientific skills, and rather than using it for the benefit of the people, they use it to further exploit the people. And certainly this type of system is too backward.
Wow, powerful, powerful words that ring true today.
Yes. Well, I like the way Stokely explains the idea of capitalism, because we as a people were educated to think capitalism was the only way that government could work. And this is the real point of what Marcus Garvey brought, because what Marcus Garvey brought was not capitalism. Really, it was more towards socialism, because it was aimed at getting the people investing in his organization, and then he returns the investment to them rather than putting it in his pocket like capitalists. And this is what made the UNIA such an attractive proposition for Black people then. And once they exiled him, this is what made the Communist Party so attractive and accepted, because they ran basically on some of the same ideas. And they came into Harlem with not with building factories, but using the arts to show Black people how they could develop their own communities, more so than developing just an individual business. The Communist Party they not only brought rhetoric, but they are the ones that financed the activities that were going on in Harlem. They built theaters, they helped establish writing groups, and because they had a newspaper that went to all their different cities, and so Black writers were able to use their newspapers as a platform. They also published books.
This was also when the Catherine Dunham School of Dance was also created.
Yeah, well, see, Catherine Dunham, those kinds of theaters came out of what the Communist Party brought to the Black community. See, it wasn't like we just came up with these ideas on our own, and even if we came up with the idea, we didn't have the financing. We didn't have the backing. And the other thing the Communist Party did was taught Black people the political process. See, the Communist Party was actually a political party. They ran candidates. There were Black people who were elected to office on the communist ticket. And in New York City, in the city council, and other states and cities, there were people who ran for political office, whether they won or not. They learned how to do that. And the other thing that the Communist Party did was they were the first organization that really helped Black people in America's courts, because there were no fair courts in America. And Black people, because of Plessy v. Ferguson, you could not appear in court as a plaintiff. You could only come to court as a victim when you were charged with something. And what the Communist Party did was they started to defend Black people in court. And the most famous case was the Scarborough Boys.
Right.
These were the two Black boys riding a train in Alabama were accused of raping a white girl. And they were they didn't have any defense, so the Communist Party came to their defense and they supplied lawyers. And that was the first time that happened. They also organized rent strikes in New York to, because the tenements were the only place you could live, and they were, not only were they dilapidated in slums, but they charged, exorbitant prices. And so the Communist Party got involved in that, and they were having demonstrations all over New York. And that's what helped force that situation to a place to where they were not just evicting people.
It was also actually a member of the Communist Party that wrote the lyrics for Strange Fruit.
Oh, yeah?
For Billie Holiday, yeah.
Oh, wow. Hey, like I say, they were a real force for Black people. They were the first political force. They were the first entertainment force. And this is what really upset J. Edgar Hoover and Woodrow Wilson. And so Hoover took it upon himself to try and, after destroying, at least after deporting Marcus Garvey, he went to work on the Communist Party. And that battle lasts all the way up until the 1950s, when you had the Civil Rights Movement began. And with the beginning of the Civil Rights Movement, you had the change in the American economy in the South, because the South functioned off of cotton. And coming out of slavery, even though Black people were emancipated, when Woodrow Wilson went into the White House, he is the one that established segregation and convict leasing and sharecropping.
And with another note is that he won a Nobel Peace Prize for doing this.
Yes, and not to mention one of the ways that they tried to destroy Marcus Garvey was with Red Summer, because what they did in 1919, they attacked and burned cities all over the country, Black areas. Chicago had one of the most notorious riots, Washington, D.C., that where Black people, the whole neighborhoods were burned down, hundreds were killed, in order to try and stop the Black people from investing in the UNIA. They had a big one in Omaha, Nebraska even. So this all fits together based on the fact that Hoover is trying to keep Black people on the bottom of this capitalistic system that Stokely Carmichael talks about. And that's the very basis of why Black Power came to the fore as it did, because we were trying to address some of the same problems of poverty in America based on what happened coming out of the 1950s and with the March on Washington. That was the idea that came out of the Black community, and it was not an idea that was developed by the so-called Black leaders. That movement developed from the Tent City movement. The Tent City movement was a movement that happened in the South when the sharecropping was no longer advantage to white people because of the cotton picking machine. They had invented the cotton picking machine in the 1930s, but it was inefficient. But by the time we get to the 1950s, it had become very efficient. So white people saw how they could eliminate using Black labor on farms and use the cotton picking machine. So they started evicting Black people, especially after the Civil Rights Movement and Black people started to vote. So, and take Memphis, for instance. There were counties around Memphis that did nothing but raise cotton. Fayette County, Hardeman County, and this is where the Tent City movement began, because they evicted all those farmers, and there were some Black farmers that owned their own land, and they allowed them to set up tents on the land and have some place to live, because they just put people off their farm. The white landowners, they just evicted them, and they had nowhere to go. They didn't have any money, and so the tent cities allowed them to at least get in, to have a place to live. And the movement that became Black Power, a lot of those kids participated in the tent city movement because there were tent cities all across the South. And once a lot of those people that moved out of tent cities, they went to the north because they thought there were jobs up there. But so many went that there were not jobs, and people in the cities started complaining about poverty. And then came this movement to March on Washington. Malcolm X talks about this in his speech about Black people. We're going to march on Washington. And Kennedy, who was elected in 1962, he got wind of it and wanted to stop, because they were talking about coming to Washington and just staying there until the government did something about poverty. Well, of course, they didn't want that.
They wanted to occupy, right?
Yeah.
It's like kind of like the Occupy movement that happened quite recently, occupying Wall Street. So this was already in the minds of everyone to occupy Washington in 1963. You were saying, right?
Yeah. Well, it started before 63, but it was in 63 that Kennedy realized he had to do something to defuse that movement. And so what he did was he got the Black leaders from that time, James Farmer, Dr. Martin Luther King, A. Philip Randolph, Whitney Young, all those guys. Kennedy brought them to Washington, D.C. And he told them that he would support the poor people's, March on Washington if they followed his direction, which was to bring other organizations into the March on Washington. These were the labor union, the AFL-CIO, the United Auto Workers, and these groups were the ones that brought people to Washington, D.C. See, they got buses, and they brought union people, they brought people from all over the country to Washington, D.C. But what the original idea was for Black people to catch the trains and buses and just come to Washington, D.C. and stay there.
Wow.
And just until the government decided to do something about poverty. And that was what Kennedy was trying to stop. Black people from coming to Washington, D.C. and staying there.
Right.
So that is how the March on Washington actually happened. And if you read Malcolm's book and listen to his tapes, he explains that. He called it the Big Six. So when by the time from the tent city movement came the March on Washington, actually, and that movement takes us to the Poor People's Campaign, which Dr. King had announced in December of 1967.
No future for people who deny their past. My foreparents, my grandparents, my mother, my father did not suffer and die to give me an education to slight, oppress, or discourage my people. Because whatsoever education I acquired out of those sacrifices of over 300 years, I shall use for the salvation of the 400 million Black people of the people of the world. And the day when I forsake my people, may God Almighty say there shall be no more light for you. Unequivocally rejected the racist assumption of much white American Christianity, namely that God had created the black man inferior and that he had intended Negroes to be a servant class, hewers of wood and drawers of water. Well, I predicated my view of man on the doctrine of Imago Dei. All men, regardless of color, are created in the image of God. Now from this premise followed the equality of all men and the brotherhood of all men. The biblical injunction of Acts 17:26 reminds us that he created of one blood all nations of men to dwell on the face of the earth. I was most interested in brotherhood within his own race, because if Negroes are created in God's image and Negroes are black, then God must in some sense be black. If the white man has the idea of a white God, let him worship his God as he desires. We have found a new ideal. Because whilst our God has no color, and yet it is human to see everything through one's own spectacles, and since the white people have seen their God through their white spectacles, we have only now started to see our God through our own spectacles. For we believe in the God of Ethiopia, the everlasting God, God of Father, God of Son, God of Holy Ghost, the one God of all ages. That is the God in whom we believe, but we shall worship him through the spectacles of Ethiopia. For 250 years we have struggled under the burden and rigors of slavery. We were maimed, we were brutalized, we were ravaged in every way. We are men. We have hopes, we have passions, we have feelings, we have desires just like any other race. The cry is raised all over the world of Canada for the Canadians, of America for the Americans, of England for the English, of France for the French, of Germany for the Germans. Do you think it unreasonable that we, the black whole world, should raise the cry of Africa for the Africans? The Negro is a man. We represent the new Negro. His back is not yet against the wall. We do not want his back against the wall because that would be a peculiar and desperate position. We do not want him there. It is because of this that we are asking for fair compromise. So the Belgians have control of the Belgian Congo, which they cannot use. They have not the resources and intelligence. The French have more territory than they can develop. There are certain parts of Africa in which they cannot live at all. So it is for you to come together and give us a United States of Africa. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. We are not going to be a race without a country. God never intended it, and we are not going to abuse God's confidence in us as men. We are men, human beings, capable of the same acts as any other race, possessing under fair circumstances the same intelligence as any other race. Now Africa's been sleeping, not dead, only sleeping. Today Africa's walking around not only on her feet, but on her brains. You can enslave, as was done for 300 years, the bodies of men. You can shackle the hands of men. You can shackle the feet of men. You can imprison the bodies of men, but you cannot shackle or imprison the minds of men. Lie down, black men, and dig. Reach up, black men and women, and pull all nature's knowledge to you. Turn ye around and make a conquest of everything, north and south, east and west. And then when you have wrought well, you will have merited God's blessing, you will have become God's chosen people, and naturally you will become leaders of the world. And as you bow down to the white man today, so a lot of races bow down to you and call you a race of masters because of the superiority of your mind and your achievements. Because no race has the last word on culture and on civilization. They do not know what we are capable of. They do not know what we are thinking. They're thinking in terms of dreadnoughts, battleships, airplanes, submarines. You know what we're thinking about? That is our own private business. So give us credit for being able to use our minds. And with people becoming conscious of themselves, determined to use their minds, you do not know to what extent they can go. Liberate the minds of men, and ultimately you will liberate the bodies of men. We love the white race, not for social fellowship, but for the common brotherhood of God intended we should live. What satisfaction can anyone get in being happy and see his brother wallowing in filth, dirt, and disease? How can you be happy living in luxury and your brother's living in disease, and then when you try to help the one out of the disease, the subtle culprit talks about disloyalty? Black men of Carthage, black men of Ethiopia, Timbuktu, Alexandria gave the light of civilization to this world. Ethiopia shall stretch forth her hands unto God, and princes shall come out of Egypt. The classes, nations, races have been quite for over 4 centuries, who has merely borne abuse, insult, humiliation, whose forbearance can only be compared to the prophet Job, as likewise lifted his bowed head and raised it up to God's skies and cried out, I am a man, and demand a man's chance and a man's treatment in this world. But I shall teach the black man to see beauty in his own kind and stop bleaching his skin and otherwise looking like what he's not. In the days of slavery, race mixture, miscegenation had occurred because the African woman had no protection from the slave master. Therefore, there is no need today for black people to themselves freely continue a practice that smacks so much of slavery. problem will be solved through higher education, through better education, and black and white will come together. That day will never happen until Africa is redeemed. Because if those who like W.E.B. Du Bois believe that the race problem will be solved in America through higher education, they will walk between now and eternity and never see the problem solved. God made man Lord of his creation, gave him possession and ownership of the world. And you have been so darned lazy that you've allowed the other fellow to run away with the whole world, and now he's bluffing you and telling you that the world belongs to him and that you have no part in it. And you don't have to apologize to anybody for being black, because God Almighty knew exactly what he was doing when he made me black. If black people knew their glorious past, then they would be more inclined to respect themselves. Yes, you heard of Johnny Walker Red and black. Well, he had his adversities, but he's still going strong. Well, I intend with your help and God's grace to continue, because my work has only just begun. And future generations shall have in their hands the guide by which they shall know the sins of the 20th century. I know, and I know you too believe in time, but we shall wait patiently for 200 years, if need be, to face our enemies through our posterity. When my enemies are satisfied, in life I shall come back, or in death even to serve you as I served before. In life I shall be the same, in death I shall be a terror to the then count on me to be the real Marcus Garvey I would like to be. If I may come in an earthquake or a plague or a pestilence or as God would have me, then be assured that I shall never desert you and make your enemies triumph over you. Will I not go to hell 1,000,000 times for you? If I don't, my work will only just then begin. For I shall live in the physical or the spiritual to see the day of Africa's glory. When I am dead, wrap the mantle of the red, the black, and the green around me, for in the new life I shall rise up with God's strength and blessing to lead the millions up the heights and the triumph that you well know. Look for me in a world when there is storm. Look for you have grace. I shall come back with countless millions of black men and women who have died in America, those who have died in the West Indies, and those who have died in Africa to aid you in the fight for liberty, freedom, and life. Any leadership that teaches you to depend upon another race is a leadership that will enslave you. Any leadership that teaches you to depend upon another race is a leadership that will enslave you. They gave leadership to our foreparents, and that leadership made them slaves. But we have decided to find a leadership of our own to make ourselves free men. Our great scholars, having passed through the colleges and universities, have thrown away the blessed record. Babylon did it. Assyria did it. France under Napoleon did it. Germany under Prince von Bismarck did it. England under America under George Washington did it. Africa with 400 million black people can do it. If you cannot do it, if you are not prepared to do it, then you will die. You race of cowards. You race of imbeciles. You race of good for nothing. If you cannot do what other men have done, what other nations have done, what other races have done, then you had better die.
And there we have it. Episode 4 of Terrorism. Thank you, John B., so much. We're going to hear more next week, same time, same place. And to wrap it up, I just want to give a shout out to Magda Fisas, the mother of a Greek hip-hop artist known as Killer P, who was murdered, I think 6 or 7 years ago, by the Golden Dawn fascist organization. That's a neo-Nazi party. They were actually a political party, and for 6 years she was fighting for justice, and they have now decided to criminalize the entire political party. And it's really a beautiful thing that's happened. And to conclude and end tonight's show, this is a song I wrote about Pablo Fisas, Killer P, the hip-hop artist. And thank you for joining us, and thank you to John B. And we'll see you next week with more Black Power Tarot. Good night.
The ballad of Pablos Visas is as sad as all the others. Our brothers who fought with words, stolen from their mothers. His words, they stung the beast. They spoke of a freedom that must be preserved by every single human. He belonged to no party. He was just an honest man who spoke the truth in rhymes like a true Shakespearean. He lived inside a ghetto, but his mind did roam free. A troubadour with a silver tongue, whose soul lives eternally. Killer P is in me. He's inside of you. He's inside me. And if you believe in freedom and you hold it in your hand and put it in your heart like an hourglass filled with sand, protect it from those fascists before they ruin this here land and kill all our precious sons with brutal bloody hands. At the stroke of midnight, they took him in an alley, outnumbered 10 to 1. They showed him no mercy. In cold blood they killed him in front of his lover, whose eyes wept oceans, whose heart will not recover, condemned to always be the lover of that martyr. She'll dress in black till the day they unite, basking in the holiness of heavenly light. Killer P is in me. He's inside of you. He's inside me. And you fight for freedom, then hold it in your hand. Raise your fist in the air and show it to the man who took away a hero and stole his whole life with hands full of hate, armed with bloody knives. Killer P is in me. He's inside of you.